Hi, this is Phil, and I'm here to tell you all about the Capes and Lunatics Patreon. Get early access to all of our interviews, including the monthly Chichester chats with writer and comic book legend DG Chichester, new episodes of classic Capes and Lunatics shows, including The Quantum Zone, This, That, or the Third, and many, many more specials, all completely uncensored. Access starts for $3 a month, full video when you pledge $5 a month. Check out the link in our show notes or go to patreon.com/capesandlunatics. Hope to see you there. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Capes and Lunatics podcast. It's me, Phil, and I am joined this week again by special guests. We've had special guests the last few weeks, but I am joined by Craig and Steve. We will get into their Kickstarter because I've talked to a few people who've done Kickstarters for like comics or like tabletop gaming and stuff, but this one is for a documentary, but it's kind of about a game, so, well, it is about a game. So instead of me rambling, why don't you gentlemen tell everyone about the Kickstarter and the doc and everything?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Craig. I'm the director of the film. And basically the premise of the film is Doc Mack, who owns the world's largest arcade, which is right outside of Chicago in Brookfield, Illinois. He's been working on his own arcade game for 28 years. Okay. So people know him for the arcade. He's known globally for the arcade. There's arcades in Japan that have modeled their arcade after him. But very few people know that he's really like this passionate creator of this 2D digitized fighting game called Dark Presence that he's been working on since he was 17. He's 46 now. So that's the premise of the film. And then Steven is Steven's my best friend. He's always kind of been involved with everything, and more than almost anybody else, he's been with me since the beginning of this journey, which has been almost 2 years. But Steve, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Steve Brown. I used to own a chain of comic book stores here in the suburbs of Chicago. I've also been a co-host of a podcast about comic books and pop culture, and I'm sure all the things you cover too, called Caffeinated Comics. We're a part of the Radio Misfits podcast network. So I've kind of been in the same realm. This whole thing that we're doing here, and Craig, we'll do like a quick answer, but me and Craig met when I had a business, a comic book store in the same town that he owned, or currently owns a video production company in. And we went to a Christmas party for a client for the video production company, just like a completely random, unrelated person. And at the Christmas party, this woman got to talking to us and said that she was in a video game. And Craig's a very curious person. So he's like, well, what do you mean you were in a video game? Like, you did a voice? And she's like, no, I was filmed in a video game. I play like a character in a video game, which is never anything you expect to hear at like a Christmas party at like a boring work event. So we spent like the rest of this party just talking to this woman who told us this like ludicrous story about how she was approached by this guy at this, I think she was at a gym at the time. I don't remember all the details.
No. Not her, no.
Well, you might know.
Yeah. Yeah, she wasn't at the gym. That's all I'm saying. She actually lived like 5 doors down from Doc. But Andrea, who's in the game, was approached at a gym. So anyway, Steve, continue with the story.
The idea is that just this guy, we had met her independently of him and had heard this crazy story that he had worked on this game and had been years and years, and they had refilmed it and all this stuff. So we kind of were like, well, that's really weird. And Craig filed it away like he does everything else that interesting that kind of comes up throughout our lives. And then flash forward like 2 or 3 years, and we saw they were filming something at the arcade, like just down the street from where we have the studio. And we started talking to the owner over there, got reintroduced to him, and it kind of dug up that concept that we had heard that he had tried to do this video game. And the kind of the elevator pitch I always talk to people, because we shoot at the arcade. We were recently at C2E2 in Chicago for the big comic convention. They had a booth at the arcade. And what I told people that came to the booth who knew about the arcade but didn't know about the documentary we were working on, or people who go to the arcade when we're there and don't know what we're filming but are interested in what we're filming, my pitch is always the same way. The arcade is the largest arcade in the world. This is, it's the Guinness World Record. He almost has 1,000 machines in this arcade. No other arcade has as many machines as this guy. Not only does he own the largest arcade in the world, this man has like 4 or 5 other businesses up and down the same strip of the highway here in this like downtown area. All of this that this man is doing, all these multiple businesses, the largest arcade in the world, is just to service. This is all a side project for this guy's ultimate goal, which is to create this like video game in the same vein of like Mortal Kombat. If you had like ADD, unlimited resources, and the inability to quit or say no. So it's like the story of the game is so much more interesting than everything else we just talked about the arcade and this guy and all his goofy like ideas about things. But it's such an interesting story that it's like it kind of needs to be told because it's so it's like if half the stuff this guy has told us is true, you wouldn't believe it. You know what I mean? But it's like we've got multiple people corroborating the same stories. It's like they just don't, things like this just don't exist anymore. You know what I mean? This is one of the few things where you can kind of turn the rock over and look underneath and be surprised by what you're finding. And there's not that many things left in the world like this, and this story is one of those kind of like hidden gems of like, holy shit. As soon as people hear about what went into making this game, it's like, that's better than the actual game. You know, the story itself is better than this 30-year game this guy's been filming.
I mean, it's just, I love the fact that there's still huge arcades around, because I know like around here, there's not like a ton of arcades left, unless you go to like a Dave & Buster's or something like that. Just,
totally. Yeah, and I don't know what it's like in Philadelphia or how it was in the rest of the country, but in Illinois, we used to have arcades when I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. They used to be everywhere. And then Illinois must have done this specifically, or maybe this was done federally, but the arcades became havens for drug dealers to deal drugs. So Illinois got around that by taxing coin-operated machines to such a degree that it wasn't profitable to operate an arcade anymore in the city or the state of Illinois. So they shut them all down. So this guy gets around it by just charging an admission fee to get into the arcade, and then you can play as many games as you like. But this guy basically reinvented the arcade model after the collapse of the traditional arcade model so that he would have a place to put the game he's been working on since the 90s. Because when he started working on this game, arcades were still a thing. But as he was filming the arcade and meeting the different people and writing the story and doing everything, the arcade industry collapsed. So while he was working on creating the game that no longer had a place to go, he reinvented the arcade industry and built the largest arcade in the world so that when he finished his game finally, he'd have a place to fucking put it. And that is just like the most bananas crazy motivation for starting a business I've ever heard in my life. You know what I mean?
I know that does sound unbelievable. Yeah, he just keeps his business going for this game. But so is it gonna? So like, I don't know. Does it look like a traditional '90s game, or like? I mean, it's been so long as he had to like, I don't want to say start over, but like redo like graphics, or I mean, because again, I know nothing about this, but like, has the technology evolved? I'm sure the technology's probably evolved since the '90s, and
yeah, because when he started it, he was 17. And they got a derelict Remax office someone gave them for 10 days. They got a bolt of green fabric and hung that down one wall. And it was Doc. It was his sister's boyfriend. It was kind of whoever he could pull together in some makeshift costumes. And you gotta applaud their ingenuity, but at the end of the day, they didn't really end up what they needed or perhaps what they wanted, because they, there were no guides. There was no internet, and there was nobody to say. You couldn't call up Midway and say, how did you make Mortal Kombat? Like, what did you do exactly? It's actually
tell you. You know what I mean?
Well, it's actually quite amazing, that what they accomplished. So I think after about a year, they realized. A year after they had filmed, they realized, like, we're going to have to redo this because we've learned a lot in the last year. So he got another abandoned storefront, got another bolt of green fabric, and this time I think he spent 4 months there. I think he lived there pretty much. He'd go home to take a shower or whatever, but he wanted to be there so that anytime anyone was available to film, they could come in and film. They run through that 4 months. Then it's really like a 10-year period of trying to get this game done. It's everything from renting a house and filling it with high schoolers to key the footage, remove the green screen from all the frames, to trying to find a programmer worth their salt that will stick around and doesn't just drop off the face of the planet, or didn't just talk a big game and wasn't able to back it up. So there were so many hurdles. And all kinds of craziness happened in that period of time. And then, a decade later, this is where it really hit what you're saying. Because a decade later, HD was the norm, and this game had been shot in standard definition. So it became very apparent. You've got to... they were going to have to redo it from the ground up. So Doc told one of his collaborators, I think he said, I want you to think about this. Either we refilm the game or we scrap it. But there's really not any in between at this point. So give me an answer on October 31st, which was a month or two away at that point. And on Halloween, his collaborator called him and said, we've got to redo it. We've got to redo it. And Doc's like, I already, I knew that. I knew the answer to that already. You're right. In the interim, though, he had 10 years for this story to sort of grow and mutate in his mind. So he'd written like 1,600 pages of stories. He'd go out at night to all-night diners just to kind of be out and about, and he'd sit there and he'd write. And so by the time they go back to go into the studio, he's like, I've got enough characters for a whole nother game. And I don't know if we're ever going to be in the studio again. So let's shoot Dark Presence, and let's also shoot at Sequel Conquering Light and add 15 more characters, all these new people, everything. And then that gets into what Steve's talking about, that at that point, everyone that was kind of just hanging around and doing him favors or were into it back in the day, now they're gone. They're living their lives. So you've got to get a whole new cast. Plus, you've got to cast 15 more people. So to Steve's point, like, the first casting ground was the Export Gym in Lyons, Illinois, where he would work out. And, you get a couple people there that look like they fit the role. And then you grab a girl at Caribou Coffee, and then a guy that used to play drums for your brother's band. And you just kind of systematically go through, and he would religiously carry these casting packets around that had, it's like a manila envelope with a CD with some songs, a copy of a comic they had made, a 38-page comic that kind of told the origin story of the game, and whatever else. And they would hand these out to people that they felt like were good.
Like, he would stop people on the street. Like, he'd go into like a coffee shop and be like, "Hey, you look really cool. Do you want to be in a video game?" Like a crazy person. Right. You know what I mean? And he'd work out in the gym, and this guy doesn't just like work out. This guy is like hanging upside down, like doing like pull-ups upside down and like climbing the walls like Spider-Man. This guy's doing things that like you can only see on like American Ninja Warrior or something.
Wow.
It's like, this guy is like carved out of wood. He looks like Jesus' white brother. It's crazy.
But what's funny though is like very few people turned him down. Most people were down to do it, and there's no money involved. There was never a promise of money. I think it was kind of like, hey, if this game does well, I'll take care of everyone. And I believe that he will. Yeah. He's a good guy, but it's a big ask. Come out to this weird, everybody says the same thing about the first time they went to this, back alley to go into this warehouse, and there's 200 weapons on the wall when you walk in. They think they're either going to be in a porno or they're going to be murdered. Like, everybody has a very similar experience. But everybody had a great time. He kind of describes this as the best years of his life. I don't know that he's couched it as such, but when he tells the stories, you get jealous. This idea of like 4 years sort of in this clubhouse, with all these revolving cast, and you're basically creating a fantasy world for a short period of time. built out of the foundation of things that you love. So when I hear him talk about all this, it's like, man, I missed out. He's only 5 years older than me. Had we
like not too far from where Craig grew up, it's like this,
right? So had we crossed paths,
yeah,
I could. If we had crossed paths earlier, I guarantee you, I would have been behind a camera and probably one of the characters.
Oh, no.
In one of the games, because everybody ended up in the game. Like the intern, he got they got some interns to help out. The intern ends up in the game. They get close and the guy gets into what they're doing. He's passionate. It's okay. Let's throw a costume on you. You're Bryce, whatever it is. So it's a really quirky story for sure. And it's super inspiring. I mean, again, like none of us can say that we've stuck with anything for that period of time. And, and maybe that's madness, right? Maybe it's time to throw in the towel and do something else. And there's plenty of other things he wants to do. In his office, he has a whiteboard with a list of other games that he has ideas for, that the guys in his studio there have ideas for. But I think most of us would have, stopped climbing the mountain. We would have come back down. So I think there's something really inspiring about that. And to Steve's point, everything else that's happened that he's known for happened because of the game. It was really an offshoot of the game. Very few people I shouldn't say very few people, that may not be fair, but far more people are aware of the arcade and stuff. He's known globally for like the arcade guy, but he's the game production guy. That's who he really is. That's where he came from. But I do think it's like, who sticks with something that long? I mean, Steven, how long did it take you? Steven did a graphic novel. And, he was an artist, and you did a graphic novel, and that took a long, long time for you to do.
Yeah.
But it certainly wasn't
long. 5 years, and it was exhausting. And
right.
It wouldn't be, the movie doesn't work without this guy. If this guy was a jerk or unlikable or boring or just not an interesting, engaging person, none of this works. It's an interesting story, but the guy himself is such an enigmatic, charismatic guy. It's so unusual. He's so peculiar. It's like I could watch this guy read out of the phone book. It's like he's just such an interesting guy. The way he talks to people, the way he interacts with people, this kind of like persona he's built for himself, the way he presents himself. He has like a uniform he wears. It's like they don't make people like this guy. He's such a unique person.
It would be the equivalent too of like, well, Phil, I don't claim to know the scope of your life, right? But you're a comic fan.
Yeah,
I know that. So it's kind of like if you're like, hey, I'm going to write my own epic comic series, create an entirely new franchise to rival Marvel and DC, and in the process of trying to get this done, you open an unprecedented, the largest comic store in the world, totally unprecedented, and it works. And Steven can tell you comic stores don't work. You know what I mean? On average.
Mine did it. Mine 3 of mine did.
Right. And, and then you start to, everything else you like, you start to do. So I see your figures in the background. So you start to say, hey, I love figures. And you're like, yeah, I'm going to make my own. He's a huge Godzilla fan. He is one of the biggest Godzilla model collectors in the world. He has hundreds of Godzilla models. I can't even imagine the amount of money this man has spent on it. He has now opened up Galloping Ghost Kaiju Kobo, which is he takes reference images for a monster, a kaiju, in sort of the Godzilla world. He gets it to a sculptor in Thailand who does like a 3D sculpt of it. Then they 3D print it back at Galloping Ghost as a test model, and then it goes to a sort of small run. I don't know if it's resin or what, but like caster to make models. And he's now selling these at like shows in Japan and stuff. So it's just like anything you like, you're like, yeah, I'm going to do that thing, which is awesome. That's how I always was. As a kid, I had the Sonic system. My friends and I designed a video game system and would draw out the levels for the games. I had Intense Comics, my own comic label, and we'd fold the paper in half and draw the comics. As a kid, anything you're interested in, you just start doing it. It becomes part of who you are. As an adult, that stops. And it didn't stop for Doc, and I think that's pretty awesome. Like, that's probably the dream, really, for most of us, is to take everything we're passionate about and say, I'm going to do this. And then if you can make a little bit of money doing that, so that you can continue to just do that. That's ideal. At the same time, like, the arcade's super successful, but that thing that he loves, what he loves most is the game and the idea of making games. His success with the arcade has really kind of gotten in the way of the game. So it's funding the game's development, but it also requires so much time and attention that it siphons away from working on the game. So it's sort of a vicious, cycle sort of a thing. But it's a really interesting story. So when I heard all of this, I was like, and again, like Steve would say, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's all kinds of insanity with like rich investors from Texas that got involved, and Doc developed a weird mystery illness for 20 years where he was puking like 10 times a day and thought he was going to die. And it just all kinds of interesting elements. I knew, like, people will watch this for 90 minutes. Like, I'm compelled to tell this story, and I think other people would be compelled to the extent that they would watch it for 90 minutes.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've talked to you guys we've been talking for 20 minutes, and I'm like, oh, I want to see this. I mean, just the journey, just the beginning of the journey. Maybe it's because I'm that age, but I'm like, I don't think the younger people realize it's like, if he started this in the 90s, I mean, just starting anything like this, there was no, like you said, there was hardly any, wasn't like an internet. You couldn't just like jump on YouTube like people do now, and this, it's like, oh, well, how do I make a game? You had to like research. And do you know how he started? Like, is it just because of the arcade? Did he kind of reverse engineer? Like, did he look at an arcade game and kind of reverse engineer, or did he know someone? Or
well, because think of it, just for timing, he was 17 when he started the game. He into the arcade 12 years ago. The arcade is actually an offshoot of the game. So one of the actors in the game wanted to open a new business, and basically Doc said, I have a business plan for an arcade if you're interested. And the guy said, yeah, that sounds great. And they opened the arcade together. Doc was hesitant because he just wanted to work on the game. And eventually that guy went on to other things after 2 years, and Doc's run the arcade out of there. So everything came from the game. The game was the foundation of everything. Making it, he was lucky enough that his sister's friend's boyfriend was a savant programmer. Okay. This guy's a really cool guy, Tom Stone. He's out in Seattle right now. We've interviewed him for the piece. He programmed his first game when he was 6. He's brilliant, right? So he was lucky enough to be partnered up with Tom, and Tom was the original programmer on the game. So Tom literally built an engine as a teenager from scratch. And Doc, they had seen some photos of like how Mortal Kombat was done. They knew you put people in front of a green screen and stuff. So it was just trying to figure out how to put all the pieces together. But then like keying, I mean, a lot of people probably don't know, like keying a green screen now. Keying means removing the green screen, so you just have the actor and nothing behind them. So you can now put them wherever you want. Keying a green screen is a hard process now. People think it's as easy as clicking a button. It's not. Back then, they didn't even have any consumer software or even prosumer software for it. So literally after the first filming, I think he cut frame by frame. And remember, there's 24, depending on what frame rate you're shooting, there's 24 or 30 pictures for every second of video. He would go by and hand cut in a free Photoshop style program. Wow. Every frame he would hand cut the character out. They just kind of did what they had to do and kind of figured it out as they went along, and it didn't work perfectly, so they had to redo it. But again, the ability to get as far as they did, we have this old promo video that they made. It's hilarious because they're all super young, and it's comedic, but it's awesome. They're showing off.
Craig owns a video production company. Like, we make professional videos for like corporate clients. Oh. We try not to do green screen because it's such a pain in the ass. We either try to talk the client out of it, or it's just prohibitively expensive to do. And these motherfuckers were doing it 20 years ago, like by hand, like carving it out like maniacs. It's like, it's absolute guerrilla filmmaking and video game making on a scale that we can't really comprehend, because they were idiot teenagers, savants, reverse engineering this stuff before the internet existed. And it's like, it's just kind of like, why would you do this? There must have been anything else to do. It's like, it's just kind of silly.
But when you love something that much, that's the reaction I always had. If you love a thing, you want to. A lot of people don't do that, right? My best friend in high school, he loved music. He was the music guy. He had the radio show. He bought vinyls of everything, and he never had any training in music at all. But I remember us being at someone's house once, and he grabbed like an accordion off a shelf and he started playing it. Okay, he figured it out, and he could always do that. He'd get to a piano and you'd figure it out. And I'd be like, you love music. Music's the most important thing in the world to you. You have the gift of a natural talent for music. And the dude went on and got a communications degree, and I think he works at a bar. You know what I mean? I don't understand. Personally, I don't understand that. I don't understand that. But I know that it happens to a lot of people. So I don't know what held him back from doing that thing. And then people will always say like, oh, if you do the thing you love every day as a job, you're going to not love it. Well, okay, but what's the alternative? Do you want to do a job as a job every day? Or do you want to do the thing you love as a job every day? And maybe some days the thing you love, you don't love so much because it's causing you problems or difficult. That's the decision I would make. That's the lesser of two evils, in my opinion. Doc certainly would make that same decision. So not criticizing anybody's life choices, because we all have our own stories. Me personally, what he did makes sense, right? And that's that's how I've tried to live my life, but I built a video production company because I wanted to, while I was developing my skills, put food on the table and not be a waiter anymore at night while I was trying to figure out how to be a filmmaker. But much like the arcade for him, the production company kind of took over, and I didn't have as much time to devote to filmmaking as I wanted to. Doing the film, which I kind of just fell into starting to do it, has shown me like, it's time to take the risk. I'm 41. I want to spend my life making movies. I've done a lot of shorts and music videos. We've done a lot of stuff, but I'm not making movies. Well, I am now. And it's like, okay, what's next? And what's next? And doing the film, I tell this to everyone I talk to, it's the art influencing the artist. Like, this has changed my life. So I only hope I can communicate some of that in the film itself and have a positive effect on the viewer to perhaps, forge a slightly different path in life that involves what they love. And some people are already there. Some people will never be there. But it's an important thing, I think.
And I think with something great like this, I mean, you guys are going to be helping each other. I mean, you're going to get the word out about the game. And then if people watch this film, they're going to be like, oh, hey, who made this film? And, that's going to get word of mouth. Yeah. But again, that game, I can't wait to see this game because it's just like all the time and effort he's put into it. I mean, those are the stories, people are like, oh, he's put all this time into it. But, anytime you hear someone like invented something or somebody famous, it's like, oh, yeah, they put in all that time and effort, especially the green screen. When you say, yeah, he, it was a pain in the ass, but, he took the time. It's like, I want this to look a certain way. And, yeah, that's when it'll be something big.
Yeah, and I mean, didn't he have he had these very elaborate ideas? I don't know how much we're able to talk about specifics, but he had very elaborate ideas for the physical machine for the arcade and how it was going to work. And I don't know, Craig, I don't know how much we could talk about it, but it was just like,
no, it's fine. I mean, he built
more thought into this than a human person could possibly put into an arcade.
The way he built the machine, they built one by hand. Is that if you beat the game without continuing, so you go straight through, the machine will dispense a limited figure of your character. Wow. They want to incorporate shock bands so that you have the option to attach a shock band to your arm, and as you take damage in the game, a minor electrical shock is delivered to your body. And Doc's like, man, it completely changes the way you play. You can't play, if you're using the shock bands, you can't play casually. It becomes, you're actually receiving damage. They are putting a GPS in the game so that the levels will mirror whatever the conditions are where you are physically in time. So if it's nighttime and it's snowing, the levels, it's nighttime and it's snowing in the levels. So to Steve's point, they put a ton of thought into there's a lot of stuff that make the game unique. I don't know if people that aren't deep into fighting games will realize 9/10 of that. But I think to people especially people that are deep into fighting games, I think this is going to be a very interesting game for them. For me, I like fighting games. They're fun. I'm not super into that world though. I just like looking at all the cool characters and trying to and then just the natural competitiveness of any of us playing a game versus someone else. But I think Steve alluded to this earlier in his own way, but it's like, to me, it's the story of the game is just so infinitely, like, no game could be as interesting as the story of making this game could be. There is no game that could be that interesting. To me, it doesn't have anything to do with the game. It's about Doc. It's about his passion. It's about the process he went through. It's about where he's gone and where he's going. That's what really makes this thing interesting.
And does it have to be the pure version? I mean, the arcade version is going to come, but I know, like you mentioned, Mortal Kombat. Has he had any thoughts of maybe like trying to sell this for like home consoles and stuff? Or
I think that there probably will be a port for Steam. I know he wants to do at least a year exclusive in arcades, and the tech aspect of it, I don't understand as well as obviously the guys working on the game. But I guess there's so much computing power required currently to run the game the way that it does that you could not physically the capacity of modern consoles is not great enough to support it. So there's basically like a supercomputer in every cabinet. Again, as a casual person watching it, I don't think you would be like, oh man, that must require a massive computer to run it. But the reality, when you start to learn, it's because it's loading all these frames of full motion HD, and they have to be loaded in this way, and things I don't even remember. We'll address in the edit and explain to the viewer. But that was definitely a concern, is that like it requires more horsepower than even a modern system can deliver, which, again, I don't completely understand it, because you've got games like God of War coming out that you're like, this game looks like reality. But it's some way, in the architecture of everything and the way it plays. So I think there is an intent to do a home version, but I know he's not going to want it to be like when Mortal Kombat got ported when we were kids, and the ports were terrible, compared to the arcade version. So it'll probably get ported, but there will be very, very stringent quality control there to make sure that it matches the experience of the arcade.
So how did you guys come to be involved? Did you just people were telling you about that, Doc, or?
Yeah, Steve was saying that Christmas party we went to, one of the girls that was in the game told us, and then that was 5 years ago. I actually was driving. I always thought we'd do something with the arcade because it's so close to us. And I thought, oh man, that'd be a cool venue for a music video or a short film or something. We never got around to doing it. And then I was driving by one day and I saw this massive film crew out there. They were shooting a scene. They had rented the arcade for a day to shoot a scene for this Apple TV show, Shining Girls. And this weird primal reaction erupted within me where I'm like, the big guys are coming out. They're coming to town now. They're taking over. They're going to shoot at the arcade. And that jostled my memory of that story, really of the idea of tying a film to the arcade. And I was with my girlfriend, and she's like weirdly friends with everyone on Facebook. So I said, you're friends with Doc on Facebook, right? Yeah. Neither of us, I think, had met him. But I said, contact him. I want to talk to him. Tell him I'm a filmmaker. I may be interested in doing a story about this game. I want to come learn about it. And I didn't think any more than that. I thought maybe it was like a 15-minute documentary, like maybe a documentary short we do to kind of. When I went in there, we talked for 4 hours, and I was like, when she told me everything, I was like, this isn't a 15-minute short. This is like a chronicle of one man's dream, undying dream. That's got to be a little bit longer. So I think the next day I texted him and I said, I want to do this as a feature film. Are you in? If you are, know that I'm going to need a lot from you. I'm going to need a lot of your time. I'm going to need, I just want to be upfront. And he said he was in. And it makes sense because this is his life's work, and we're engaged in the process of immortalizing that in our own way, the story of it, the origins of it. So, yeah, that was about 2 years ago.
And it's just crazy because he has all this. Like, he filmed it. So he has all these tapes and all this VHS. And, I mean, not only has Craig filmed, hundreds of hours of interviews, he has hundreds of hours of footage from the 90s when they filmed it initially and when they refilmed it. And it's just and then you see these people, as kids, and then you see them being interviewed as old they're grown, they have
Older
kids.
people, yeah.
And it's just wild to see that. Like, a big running gag is that the game is always 6 months in development away from being completed, and it always will be. And it's like, it's almost better if the game doesn't come out. And I don't know anything about video games. Like, I've played video games, but I'm not a big video game guy. I don't really care about the game. All I care about is the story. The story is so much bigger, I think, than the game and the arcade and everything else, because the story's all of that. And it's something that anyone can experience. To Craig's point, this game is a game built for fighting game fans. Guys like me and Craig, we're not going to get all the minutia of what went into this game. But the story, anybody can relate to a story about an insane level of passion and drive to basically achieve, like, a life's dream. How many people can say they do that? And this guy's been trying for 30 years and has checked off, like, subsequent life dreams in the pursuit of a bigger one. It's like, who does that? It's just it's such a wild story to just hear or be a part of.
Oh yeah, I mean it's just the legend. I'm like, yeah, I haven't been in gaming. I haven't gamed in a long time, and yeah, just the legend, the story. Just who? I don't think there's probably no other game on earth that that's someone has poured this much time and effort into.
Yeah.
No, the Guinness record holder is Duke Nukem Forever, which I think I've learned, in this process. I think that was 14 years and 4 months.
Wow.
So we're at 28 years. I mean, we're going on 28 years.
Yeah.
We were at 28 years a little while ago. And so we've definitely basically doubled that. I heard that there was a game, Beyond Good and Evil 2, that was like 15 years in development. I'm not even sure if it came out, honestly. So we're basically in the area of having doubled the world record holder, yet no one's aware of this. Guinness doesn't know that there's an erroneous entry in their book there. They just don't know. So it's definitely no game reported on that I'm aware of has ever taken nearly this long.
So you said you've been working on this for 2 years, like 2 years now?
Mm-hmm.
Is that like a typical time for a documentary, or is it just like there's so much information here and just it's like you have to cover how many decades already?
Yeah, I think both. It depends on the doc. I think what I end up craving right after 2 years is that film that like it's an event based film. So we're filming like an arm wrestling competition, or we're filming the protests on Wall Street, or something where it's a collapsed period of time. It's bounded, and then you're going and edit and put. But I think even then, like it always expands. You've got your interviews, you've got your archival materials. Oh, what if we just went and got this? Our timeline is impacted only by our budget, which is why we're running a Kickstarter now. I'm not shy about it. I would say I put $60,000 into it over the past 2 years. I'm tapped. I don't have any more money to put into it. Otherwise I would, right? We would just finish it. So we're trying to raise the money we have a little bit of money left, and this Kickstarter is going to end, and we're hoping it's going to be very successful, and that'll then be that little bit of overlap and bridge into that will get us to finishing off the film. We could have probably finished this, perhaps months ago. But again, we have to pay our bills and we have obligations to other people. So it's definitely taken longer. And then just amassing money, I definitely didn't have 60 grand I could just put into it. It was like, okay, I can get this money together here, this money together there. So part of it is practicality. And then part of it is scope, right? So getting some of the interviewees has taken time. It's building relationships, finding time when people can come out here if they've moved away. And just the amount of things we've wanted to cover has taken a significant amount of time. So I think it's all sort of related. I think, if we got fully funded today, every dime we needed to finish, we'd be done by the end of the year. It's been a long process, but Stephen will tell you, like, I'm not resting on my laurels here. Like, I'm all about getting things done because we've got 20 other ideas. I mean, truthfully, 100 other ideas, and we want to do those as well. So I always say, there was a horrible quote in the paper recently. I don't know if you saw this, Steve, but they quoted me as saying, "I don't want this to be my dark presence," or something. It was, it sounded like I was dissing the game, and there was a little bit of context that I think left out, which was me saying like, it's not going to take 28 years. This isn't going to. It was a tongue-in-cheek comment, and it got a little bit out of context to where it looked like I felt dissing the game, which is not my intent at all. But just saying, playing with that idea of like, this game has been somebody's passion project and it's taken an absurd amount of time. This film will not take an absurd amount of time, which some people hearing 2 years may feel, oh my God, what's wrong? Why isn't it done? Oh, it's an exhaustive process. And to Steve's point, we have hundreds of tapes that we have had to log everything that's on them from the past, plus 45 interviews, a bunch of B-roll, and there's still stuff that we need to tell the story the way we want to tell it. So it's just a very comprehensive path to walk.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, the more we talk about it, the more it's clicking in my brain. I'm like, I could see this coming from like, something like this coming from like a Hollywood even studio, those ones where they're like, oh, based on a true story. Everyone told them it couldn't be done. And, just one of those, like the feel good movie where it's like, yeah, no one believed, but then in the end he finally gets it done. And
it's too weird to be Hollywood. So the sentiment is there. I think reality is too weird for Hollywood. Hollywood actually, I think, de-weirds the truth of existence.
Maybe. And
that's the beauty of indie film and of documentaries, is if you can show the true oddity of existence. But yes, I think you could definitely do the Hollywood version of this, where you change this, tweak that, and maybe Doc will sell the rights to the story, and that'll fund every other game he wants to make. They could do an Apple TV series or something. It would definitely be a fun biopic.
I'm just saying, I could see this movie like like I said, this could skyrocket you. Maybe just. Again, again, like you say, Hollywood, I could, they'll do his story, after he makes a couple million, and then they'll be like, oh, hey, this game's successful. Let's tell the story about how he got here.
Right.
Yeah. Cause I don't know, maybe it's just in my head. Cause me and my son went to see the Air movie this weekend, the whole making of the Air Jordan brand and all that. So,
I mean, that would be amazing. I think for me, the most important thing is I want resources. Generally, that's in the form of money and time. And the reason I want those resources is to make art. It's not to amass money, and it's not to exploit time. Yeah. So if that would be awesome. I mean, my dream is to take our fledgling film studio, which is Year of the Phoenix Productions, and have that be something that's continuously putting out really interesting content. All my stuff, but then also there's a lot of people I work with that have fantastic ideas and are wonderfully creative people, and I would like to support them and support people I have yet to meet. So that's sort of the dream, is to kind of create our own. Is basically what Doc did, honestly, is like carve your own piece of the globe out. You know what I mean? And so it would be awesome if it was successful, mainly because, hey, if you're telling a story, you're a storyteller, you want an audience, you want people to hear it, you want to have effect on people, A. And then B, the success would allow us to then, the things that we want to do, it would make those possible. I mean, there's no desire for fame or riches. Of course, everybody would like to be respected for the work they do. It wouldn't hurt to have some extra cash to, I still haven't bought a PS5, but it doesn't really, I don't even have time to play a PS5 because I'm just working on the damn movie all the time. So it doesn't even really matter at this point. But I think that's sort of the end goal. But yeah, if this, had some effect where it got us out there in the world and brought us other opportunities, that would be absolutely fantastic. And then we could do our own comic book movies. Steven, I just bringing it back to your show. I mean, Steven is the most knowledgeable comic book fan I've ever known. Like, he ran comic stores for 7 years. He's drawn a comic. He's did 500 and something episodes of a comic-based podcast, and has certainly increased my education of comics significantly by recommending me certain things. And being able to point out things that like have spoken to who I am as a audience member.
And
talk about. I always.
Okay.
Oh no, I was going to say we'll just talk about like what would we do if I got to do a comic movie, because I honestly think like most of the Marvel movies are shit. That's coming as a filmmaker, okay? I'm a filmmaker, so most of the superhero movies out there are not fantastic, but I like superhero stories and I really like some of the comics. So, and I tease Steve all the time, just telling him like I'm going to do the Jubilee movie. You know what I mean? I'm going to do the Dazzler movie.
Oh, you'd be surprised. I have talked to like comic book writers and like other creatives, and Dazzler's name keeps coming up. So
they're out there, people.
Yeah,
hate on every character is somebody's favorite.
Yeah.
So.
Dazzler is awesome. I mean, my favorite X-Men's probably Kitty Pryde, but I actually do like Jubilee, and I like Dazzler. I want to do this like female heavy. They did an X team that was all female, right?
It didn't last too long. Brian Woods tried an X book that was like an all women's team. It was cool. Oliver Copiel drew it. It was a beautiful looking book, but just like anything else, X-Men they throw 10 different titles at the wall and just it lasts, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there was a miniseries. There was a miniseries not too long ago, X-Terminators. Dazzler and Jubilee were both on the team, so you might want to check that. It was only like 5 issues. So.
Is it good? Is it good though?
I mean, it was decent. I know the writer Leah Williams. She was like it was like over the top. But I mean, it was good, yeah. But again, Jubilee and Dazzler were both on the team, so.
I miss Dazzler. I miss the classic Dazzler, though. It's got to be like the disco.
Oh, okay.
Very short-lived.
That was the best iteration. Didn't she have roller skates?
Oh yeah. What, the white costume and the roller? Yeah.
You got to have the white costume, the makeup, and the roller skates. That would be awesome.
So if you ever chance to, like, if they gave you an X-Men movie, Dazzler would definitely be a part of that.
Well, the team I would make, I don't think anybody would want me to make that movie. So I would do Kitty Pryde would lead the team. You'd probably have Jubilee on there, which is a conflict because I know Jubilee, I think, led the team at one point. You got to throw Dazzler in there. I love Nightcrawler. So I definitely want some Nightcrawler action. So it would be like a weird team that wouldn't work, probably.
I think they let you get away with a lot if you like add a Wolverine in there. They're just like, yeah, okay.
Orders for you.
I don't want Wolverine. It's got to be Wolverine. Is so like I loved Wolverine growing up, but I think Wolverine's been beaten into the ground. Wolverine is the X-Men the only X-Men I feel like any normies ever care about, so to speak.
Yeah. That's like that was the 90s. I mean, Wolverine, Spider-Man, Ghost Rider, Punisher always made appearances in 20 books every month. Yeah.
And that's sort of if you take I forgot one of them you could take out. Spider-Man you can take out. I love Spider-Man, but if you do like the Ghost Rider, Punisher, Wolverine, that's like the guy driving the pickup truck with the nuts hanging.
Yes.
Comic, that's like his ultimate team,
Oh yeah, all those guys have the Punisher logo on their truck now and stuff. Yeah,
and it makes you like hate the Punisher, and it's not his fault.
And they probably haven't read a Punisher comic since like 1992 or something. If they ever read it, if they ever read it, they might have read one in like 30 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, so no, I don't know. We were on a comics podcast yesterday, and they were asking us if you could adapt anything. What would you adapt? I don't think Steve answered that, because I said I would do this is something Steven introduced me to. I would do the Madrox, the Multiple Man, as a noir story, which is very much like the 6-issue miniseries or whatever. Steve introduced me to this years ago, and I was like, that's a really cool story. That would be a very cool... you could do it as a show for sure. But I don't think what would you do, Steve? I don't think you answered that question. If you had your choice, what would you adapt?
Oh yeah, they should do a period piece, 1960s Fantastic Four. Like they just reboot it, do the fuck the MCU, just do the Fantastic Four, set it in the 60s, go crazy, go Kirby. Like that's what I'd have them do.
What would you do, Phil?
I mean, it's so cliche. I mean, I love Spider-Man and stuff. I'm so like Marvel and DC. I'm so like hyped. Like my favorite on the DC side is probably Nightwing. But like, I don't want DC. I don't want them to touch it at this point because
they can't be trusted with it.
These days, no, because I'm like, I kind of want a Nightwing movie, but I'm just like, I don't trust them these days to make a good Nightwing movie. So maybe it's better they don't touch him for a while. Like, I mean, we talk about it here. Me and my co-host, still have no idea how that Flash movie's coming out.
Oh yeah,
just with Ezra Miller.
Like, it was so easy. All they had to do was they had Michael Keaton come back. It's like, why aren't they just doing a Batman Beyond movie?
Yeah,
no one cares about the Flash. Just make Michael Keaton.
I love the Flash, but there's, I mean, just Ezra Miller, just all the controversy. Yeah, just
they just.
What did he do? I don't follow.
He's done. They were saying like he like basically there was breaking and entering wasn't there. There's like he threatened people. He was threatening people. There was even like did he kidnap somebody or just hold somebody for like a day or? But it's just there's like
for it's just whatever it is. It's crazy. You hear about some of these actors and they're into stuff.
But it's like they let his movie come out, but they filmed the whole Batgirl movie and they didn't release that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
But that was I read. I forgot why that was, so I can't. But I read it was a stupid business thing where I forgot what it was.
Yeah, because it's like when Discovery came in and like kind of bought Warner's and stuff, and like they're like, oh yeah, it's like a cost cutting move, but it's like the film was already made, so it's like, what were they worried about? That just advertising.
They're already going to make billions of dollars. Why does every decision have to be driven by can we milk just a couple more million out of this? You know what I mean? You're not catering. They're not catering to the fans at all. No. The people that really love this stuff. They're businessmen, and we forget that. And then they're the ones that come in and corrupt this shit. Mm-hmm. How many great comic movies are there? There's a lot of great comic books. How many great comic movies are there? I'm trying to think right now.
Well, we always say it's like. They're going to make another Lord of the Rings, like $1 billion Lord of the Rings show on Amazon because no other fantasy novels exist.
Exactly.
So just grabbing like the next Game of Thrones, they're doing prequels to Game of Thrones and they're doing prequels to Lord of the Rings. But like, Craig, what's that big fantasy series?
Oh, yeah.
Mistborn?
I'm a huge fantasy literature fan. There's a series called Mistborn, which is a huge series. Brandon Sanderson, who wrote it, is like a massive author.
Yeah,
you've got this massive built-in audience already, and I'm like, do this series, do something a little bit different. The world is
like
different.
Fantasy, and there's an appetite for it, but it's like the people who run Hollywood and make decisions who make movies, they're morons. They only know how to do the same thing over and over again. So it's like, give us more Iron Man, give us more Avengers. They don't know what people want. People want like new stuff, and that's why they're just like, oh well, Lord of the Rings made a lot of money, so just let's do that again. And it's like, you idiots, Lord of the Rings made a lot of money because people like quality fantasy projects. That's what you can just do that again.
Well, and there was nothing like that. Not that there had never been anything like that before, but at that time nobody was doing like a deep dive, relatively serious fantasy story. So yeah, I don't know. I struggle with it because I actually really do love comics.
Well, the problem I'm always saying, it's like, the source material is these comics, and they don't seem to like put the time and effort into the comics anymore. At least like the promotion and stuff. Because again, I was a kid in the 90s reading these things. I mean, you could go down to the grocery store, you could go down to a newsstand to pick these up. Now it's like you have to go to a comic shop and. I mean, the access isn't there. That's where we're like every Marvel movie. At the end of every Marvel movie, or right before every Marvel movie, why don't you have a commercial saying, "Hey, do you love this movie? Well, go down to your local comic shop and buy the comics that these stories came from."
Yeah, we would have killed as a former retailer. We would have killed for any kind of partnership, call out, shout out, anything. We partnered with every local theater we could. We put movie posters up. We had booths at theaters. We did tabling events. And I knew the writing was on the wall for comic book stores. It was the same year Black Panther and Avengers Infinity War came out in the same year. and we didn't see a bump in sales in either of those titles. Both had brand new titles the months those movies came out. And I was telling my business partners, we got to close these stores. Like, we can't do this anymore. It's not working. Because it was like, the movies don't help the books at all. It's a one-way street.
Yeah, no.
Comic fans go to see movies.
But
fans of the movies don't read comics.
No.
But they'll go to Target and buy
T-shirts and
Captain America T-shirts. So why? Because we had to watch the other comic podcasts we did. They wanted to talk about Teen Titans, the Judas Contract animated film, which was like way out there for me because I don't really know much about Teen Titans. But we watched the film, and this always happens. We'll watch the film, and then I go to Steve and I say, "Hey, man, Damian Wayne was like a really cool character. How do I learn his story? Where do I go?" And he's like, "Oh, read the Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison's a psychopath. Yeah, but he's a good writer." Well, he is. I've never read his work because he says crazy shit about, you know what I mean? He's like Alan Moore. Alan Moore's a genius, but we already had one Alan Moore. We didn't need.
Grant Morrison, he's sitting there smoking ayahuasca, and I mean, yeah, he comes up with stuff, especially like his more cosmic stuff, like JLA and stuff. Steve, yeah, it's just like it's like, oh, they're in a dimension where there is no light, just sound, and it's just.
Yeah, his ideas were crazy. He's a good storyteller. I think he's a bit full of himself, but it's like, I always separate. It's like, just if it's a good story, it's a good story. You know what I mean? The guy's not writing Nazi propaganda or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's palatable, readable comic books. These are good stories. It doesn't matter
right.
that he's an asshole,
These stories sound fascinating, so I will have to bend a little bit. But my point is, I don't get it because when I would like even just watching that film, there was 2 or 3 characters. I'm like, wait, I want to. Why did this happen? Or where can I learn about really Raven's origin and like what this thing is all about? And I remember Steve always telling me, you said it with Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't know if you just brought that up or not, but he's like, Guardians of the Galaxy came out, it was huge, and then the comic folded, didn't it? After the film, didn't they cancel the comic or something like that?
Well, I don't know if they quite canceled it, but it happens where it's like the people come in and it's not anything like the book. You know what I mean? It's like that happened with X-Men when the X-Men movies came out. They came into the stores and the books didn't look anything like the fucking movie, so they didn't see a bump in sales. It's like, it's just not, there's not usually my horror with, we watched the Judas Contract, and I read the Teen Titans story, the Marv Wolfman press run, but I was a kid. I wasn't around when that came out. I reread it. I read it as a teenager and loved it. Mm-hmm. That's a really, really good story with a phenomenal twist ending, and Craig loves twist endings. The problem is when they take that story, they condense it down to 90 minutes. It doesn't have the impact of having what developed over the course of like a year of you reading that comic to get that twist ending. And then my horror is always like, it's like when Watchmen came out. My buddy went to go see Watchmen with his girlfriend, and she had never read the comic. And they watched the movie, and then he said, "Do you want to read the comic?" And she said, "No, I get it. I don't need to read the comic. I get it." And it's like, that's what's scary to me, is that you don't want to read the superior comic. You just accept the movie because you get the point. You get the twist.
Yeah.
And Craig's one of the few people where that wasn't the instance, where he sees the movie and he's like, oh, I do want to read a comic with Damian because he was in this movie. And it's like, it doesn't matter that you don't want to read the Teen Titans run from the 80s that's super dated and probably hard to read for a modern reader. But it's like, it's cool that you want to read about a different character for a different comic. And I can point you where to go for that, or a buddy can, or the internet can, or you can, or whoever. And that's the hope, is that people watch this stuff and then say, there's more good stories out there. I always say it's like the comic movies, the adaptations, it's like they're never as good as this story. It's impossible.
Oh, no. Because, again, like you said, I mean, it's like, you take a 90-minute, 2-hour movie and you're trying to condense, what it might have been a year of comics, 2 years of comics, and it's never going to be as good because it
just can't be.
Yeah, no.
Well, and you also have those producers in Hollywood thinking they know how to, how Spider-Man should be done or whatever. And it's like, you don't. And the comics don't have that level of oversight. It's a free, I guess it is a big business. Like there is a lot of bureaucracy.
You can't really get away with crazy shit like they could back in the day. Like that's kind of like why older comics are always, I find, more interesting, because they weren't paying attention to what they were doing in the comics back in the day.
Well, yeah, they weren't owned by Disney and stuff. They weren't owned by this giant mega corporation.
Controlled. you know, they might do a crazy thing with Spider-Man in the comics, but it's all very controlled and calculated. You know, if they're going to do something wild with Spider-Man that might get publicity, they know ahead of time, hey, we might get a little publicity for this. We're going to make a black and Hispanic Spider-Man, or make a gay, like make Iceman gay, or whatever the last like character they outed was. So you see that kind of stuff when they make a political statement, but for the most part, these characters are like well protected corporate.
Oh yeah, because it's like, we're gonna put out T-shirts for 5-year-olds. We don't need Spider-Man killing people every 2 seconds. Yeah,
Gwen Stacy and like I don't know what issue of Spider-Man, but like they would never do that now.
Oh, that was the 70s. Yeah.
No, it's like when they did it, it was crazy. And it's like they just wouldn't allow that kind of stuff to happen anymore.
Yeah. It's good for their money flow, their cash flow, I guess, that they're owned by Disney. But it's just like, that's like there's certain directions they probably won't let them go. And
right.
And it's so funny how you were saying, you know, that people would come into the shop and the comics didn't look like the movies. They've been trying more and more to like do that because like all of a sudden, like when the Punisher hit Netflix, like all of a sudden the Punisher was getting drawn by looked like John Barenthal, and like now Sam Wilson's starting to get drawn like Anthony Mackie and stuff.
Yeah,
so they're trying.
There's a lot of backwash from the movies, and I think it's a stupid thing they do. So like. A good, for instance, is Sam Wilson as Captain America. Sam Wilson was Captain America years ago.
Yeah.
Because they just made him Captain America in the MCU like last year, now he's got to be Captain America again in the comic books.
Yeah.
And then when Age of Ultron came out, Marvel didn't own the rights to the mutants. So they changed Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch's origin in the comics to where they were like the High Evolutionaries kids or something, and they weren't mutants anymore. And it's like, it's the tail wagging the dog. You know what I mean? Marvel adjusts their continuity for what's going on in the movies, not realizing that the movie continuity is temporary. The comic continuity lasts generations. You know, Spider-Man lost his mechanical web shooters because Sam Raimi did organic web shooters in the movies. So they got rid of them for a couple years and then had to change back because those movies went away and nobody remembers them. It's like, it's a very stupid, short-sighted, idiotic, dumb fucking thing the comic writers do, or the editors make the comic writers do, because it's short-sighted, dumb, stupid, and makes no sense, you know?
Yeah. Like, it's just, that always dumbfounds me. It's just like, oh, there's a, and like anytime you see it, like, oh, there's a new MCU movie come in, or there's a Disney Plus series. It's like if someone doesn't have a series, but they're getting a show, guess what? They're getting at least a mini series. Yeah,
the title's gonna be coming right around the corner, you know.
Mm-hmm. Okay, like clockwork anymore. All right. Before I let you guys go, again, thank you so much for your time. Tell people once again, where can they find the Kickstarter? What do they need to do? Let's get this movie out. Let's get this talk out there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So we've simplified the link. So it's ghostlordkickstarter.com/start. That will take you directly to the Kickstarter. There's also Ghostlord's Quest is a website for the film. You'll actually learn more on the Kickstarter because they demand a lot of information, which is good. Ghostlord's Quest is basically our handle on all socials, whether that be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. Check it out. We are exactly halfway through our campaign. We are at 55% of our funding. So we're like right on the dot. So we definitely are incredibly grateful for everybody that's been generous and has gotten involved. And we still have a decent amount of ground to cover. So I would encourage everybody to go check it out at the very least. Go there because we have a trailer already based on the footage we've already shot. It's a pretty fully formed trailer. Check it out. At the very least, check that out to see what's going on and hopefully get invested in the story. And if you can contribute something, it would mean the world to us as we seek to achieve our dreams to have that sort of support from the larger community.
But yes, Craig, thank you. As soon as we get off here, can you email me those links? I will put those in the show notes because this will go on YouTube and it'll go on our podcast a few days from now. So it'll go two different places. So
fantastic! Thank you so much. Thank you for having us, letting us ramble. Talk about our project. Talk about comic books.
Oh, I mean, this documentary sounds interesting. I mean, I want to learn all about this doc guy, man. this is incredible story. Like I said, I mean, any other time it would be like a big Hollywood movie. It's like everyone said he couldn't do it.
Yeah,
The trailer kind of writes itself almost.
Oh, yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Again, this has been a pleasure. Again, if you have any other projects, keep my email handy. I'll have you back on. We can discuss more. So
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
all right.
Yeah.
And everyone, go check out the Kickstarter.
Thank you, man.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.